I had a great opportunity recently to try out a digging tool that's been hand forged by blacksmith Michael Drinkwater. Obviously I took things too far, and before long I'd pulled out an entire row of underperforming fruit trees, which led me to be thinking, what am I going to put in their place? G'day, I'm Tim Thompson. Do you have apple trees or other fruit trees at home that just aren't behaving and aren't giving you the fruit you need, and they're full of disease? I've just been pulling out a whole stack of old fruit trees, and my aim is to actually set up a dwarf rootstock trellised system at home. So I've come to meet with Alan Upton, who's an experienced commercial grower of apple trees, to get some tips from him about how to set up a much more complex but infinitely more rewarding orchard system in the home. Guys, if you like this sort of video, don't forget, hit the little subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, and there's plenty more content on timthompson.ag. G'day Alan, how are you, mate?
Morning, Tim.
Now Alan, I'm relieved to see that such an experienced fruit grower has an apple tree like this in the backyard. Now I will point out you inherited this tree when you bought the farm, and the plan is to get rid of it.
Yes.
But you've got some tips for people if they do have an out of control tree like this. This is in pretty bad shape. You've got some tips for people, and the first one is to prune this time of the year or in summer.
Yes, well, pruning at this time of the year when you can see some flowers coming out,
Yep.
that's a good start. You can at least see where the fruit is. If you've got flowers, you've got a potential of getting fruit, and you can see what's working for you and what's not.
And we can get rid of all of this stuff at the top without it bolting like it would if we chopped it off in winter.
Yeah, in a midwinter cut, that would just replace all that growth the very next season.
Yep.
By pruning it this time or later, you can prune to have more flowers and fruit on the tree,
Yep.
and the fruit will tame down the response to the big cuts.
Well, there's a lot of good advice there, guys, but we're not here to rescue this tree today.
No.
We're here to look at the amazing things you're doing in your hobby orchard. It's kind of like how a mechanic retires with 16 cars.
Yeah.
You've got a large orchard, but it's just a hobby for you.
Yes.
Let's go and have a look, because you've got some amazing advice for people that want to set up a trellised orchard.
Okay.
After a successful career as one of the most renowned apple growers in the Yarra Valley, Alan's retired to over 300 acres of beef cattle, sheep, and a small hobby orchard of over 500 trees to keep him busy in his retirement. We're spending a bit of time today with a master of his craft, and I hope you enjoy and get a lot out of the tips and tricks that Alan uses in his hobby orchard. Okay, so Alan, we're going to start with the roots and go up for this video.
Yes.
There's a few very important things to know about planting rootstocks, and that is that they're quite fragile and vulnerable, aren't they?
They do have quite a brittle and quite a sparse fibrous root system on them,
Yep.
and that's part of what makes them a dwarf. They're just not easy growers.
So when I'm planting my rootstock at home, what's your advice to me for the first couple of years?
Give it plenty of attention.
Yep.
Moisture, keep the moisture right.
Yes.
Not too wet, not too dry.
So establish your irrigation before you plant. Almost.
Establish your irrigation. Good soil condition around there.
Yep.
Because they're babies.
Yeah.
They need looking after.
Fertilisers that are very important for the first couple of years.
Yes, probably higher on the growth nutrients like your nitrogen.
Yep.
Because you're wanting to grow tree top.
Yes.
Nitrogen's not so important when you're wanting to grow fruit. It's more potassium based.
So in, say, the third year, I'll swap over from a heavy nitrogen phosphorus sort of
Mix.
regime,
Yes.
over to more...
They can
Potassium.
come down a bit and the potassium comes up.
Okay, all right. So that's something that's good to know. Now, there's something about the size of the rootstock that tells you about the rest of the plant as well, isn't there?
Yes, that can be measured here to, at 150 mil above the ground level. You can work out what your potential cropping load should be for that tree by knowing the size of the rootstock here, the cross-sectional area. You can work out some figures.
When you're measuring the trunk, each variety is a little bit different, but generally,
yes,
what is it?
Yeah. Oh, look, it can be between 2-3 fruit per square centimetre to 6 or 8 fruit per square centimetre, depending on the variety.
So some varieties are heavier croppers than others.
Yes, you get your early varieties.
Yep.
You've got to have lower fruit numbers to get your size that you want in February, early February, compared
Yep.
to a pink lady, which is nearly May when you're harvesting. It's got extra 3 months on the tree to keep growing.
Okay.
So they can generally crop heavier. Not that you... That's just an indicator, and it's what a commercial orchard uses to judge how many fruit they need on the tree or in the allotted space.
So it's very similar to grapevines. The trunk diameter does determine the number of fruiting structures that you can leave on the rest of the plant.
Yes.
It's plumbing.
Yes.
It's got to get the sap flow.
Yes.
Now these rootstocks that we've got here, they're dwarfing rootstocks, and they're at around about a 40% dwarfing rate. Is
30,
that correct?
40%, yeah. These
So 30 to 40% of the potential size that this tree could actually reach.
if it was on a vigorous rootstock.
Yeah.
And a vigorous rootstock is either a seedling or one of the older fashioned commercial rootstocks which can grow a huge tree. But we don't want that at all.
Now these rootstocks were originally developed to combat disease, weren't they?
120 years ago.
Yeah.
They were designed to actually restrict the size of the tree so that in England and Northern Hemisphere countries where they have high fungus disease pressure, the sooner you stop the growth, because it's the young leaves that get the fungus disease.
Yep.
The sooner they stop in the summertime, the less chance they've got of continuing to get infected with new fungus infections.
Because you were saying it was only 2 or 3 days of vulnerability to black spot.
Yeah, black spot, the common fungus disease for apple,
Yep.
is the young leaves don't have the wax on them, and
Yep.
it allows them to be more susceptible. The older leaves, by the time they get 3-4 days old, they're fairly impervious to getting infections. So if you stop the tree growing new leaves, you stop the chance of getting more infection.
And the side effect was we ended up with really closely planted fruit trees, and we can actually increase the tonnage per hectare. What's the average tonnage per hectare in commercial orchards these days, Alan?
100 tonne per hectare plus.
Just because of the dwarfing rootstock and being able to shrink the trees in close together.
We are really just a big solar panel
Yeah.
collecting sunlight. And if you can cover the area, the bigger the area you cover, less shade that hits the ground, the more chance you've got of converting that into your sugars and that gets stored in the fruit.
Let's have a look at this trunk now and see how you've set it up, because this is a really important part of the whole trellising system. All right, Alan, so this tree here, you've really just got the one trunk, haven't you?
Yes, once again, there's a root system in the ground,
Yep.
and this is one trunk coming up here, or limb, and these pieces here, these feathers or these small laterals here,
Yep.
are only ever intended to be a fruiting arm, fruiting piece.
And you can see lots of lovely fruiting buds on them ready to go.
Well, this is a pink lady, and they do bud up even on 1-year-old wood, which makes it very easy to get a good crop. We'll get some fruit off these very young wood,
Yep.
whereas this down here is on 2-year-old wood, and they're more your traditional fruit bud.
style, right.
And they will set fruit readily. These are out on this 1-year-old wood. They will grow a little bit. These here will develop into more spur-like things, and will guarantee to get 2, maybe 3 good apples off each one of these next year.
So you only want your fruiting stock to come out about halfway between the two trees, or about an arm length.
Barely an arm length away from the tree, and barely an arm length away from the tree next door, so that this area all gets filled up with fruiting pieces of wood.
So the aim is to always maintain your fruiting spurs to 2 or 3 years of age, and cut out those that are older, and always have a fresh crop coming through.
Exactly.
Now, Alan, things don't always go to plan.
No.
And we're talking about having one solid leader,
Yes.
or one solid trunk or
Yes.
branch. And we've got one here that looks to me like it's got 2. Can you explain to us a little bit about what you would do in this situation, and how you'd fix this tree up, and when you would likely do it?
Yes, this tree here has had what we term blind wood up this side of the tree, and is for some reason or other thrown out this good strong shoot on this side, but because of the crotch angle, it's this angle down here, and the strength of it, it's growing up trying to compete with the leader.
So the crotch angle, Alan, is simply the angle that this branch comes off the main trunk,
Yes.
and you want that down as flat as possible,
As flat
and this
as
angle's
possible.
too steep.
When it's pointing up, it grows strongly, and it wants to keep growing strongly. And this would become far too crowded. So what you're after is more this type of angle coming out here. This one won't get out of control. This one won't be out of control. But this one here, you got one on this side, nice wide angle there. This one's narrow. So this one here has got to go.
So it's really important to have the angle of your crotch right, or it gets cut off.
This one here is never going to be a good limb or a good fruiting arm. It just wants to be the leader also. So it's got to come off. So I cut it off like this here. Okay, we've just cut this one out here, and that's left what is known as a toilet seat cut for obvious reasons. It's just a long oval cut, but it allows these buds to grow out here next season, and we'll end up with something nice and flat angle like that. On the next tree, I've got one here that I cut last year, and you can see this growth has come out, and this one. This is a nice one.
So it's constant regeneration in the orchard when you've got
Yes.
trellised fruit trees. You never leave them alone. You're always aiming for that lovely angle.
Yes, in control. We've got to
Yep.
be in control, not the tree.
Now, what about bare patches? Things like Granny Smiths can have a lot of blind buds in them. We can end up with a long section of trunk that is not
Yes.
fruiting. You have a solution for that as well.
Oh, I learned it from somebody else. Don't worry about
great.
that.
So, Alan, we've got some trees here that are obviously quite conspicuously lacking fruiting wood down below, and with a trellis system you want fruiting wood almost all the way down to the dripper wire.
Yes.
So what do you propose that we do about this? There's obviously buds here that aren't shooting.
Yes, well last year there's some samples here, examples here, and
Yep.
some on this tree here, where I've simply got my pocket knife here with a saw blade on it,
Yep.
sort of saw blade, and by simply wiping that across there,
About a quarter of an inch above the bud.
somewhere like that,
Yep.
that forces this bud to wake up.
It feels like it's had its head cut off and it
It-
wants to start growing.
As far as it knows, the rest of the tree above it is gone.
Yep.
And
It's interrupted the oxygen flow.
Yes,
Yep.
it now thinks it's got to get out and be the new leader again. When these come out, and in a few years' time when they've got fruit out here, that's just in front of me. That's easy fruit for me to pick and harvest. Whereas if it's up here, I've got to get a ladder. Don't want to do that. So forcing this area to fill its allotted space between that and the next tree with productive fruit area, that's my aim.
So, Alan, here's a tree that hasn't been pruned yet,
Yes.
and you were telling me that there's a ratio you look for determining whether something's good to leave or whether it has to go.
That's right. It gets down to a 1-to-3 ratio. The trunk of or the limb, if it's this size, the fruiting arm must be less than a third of that. So it's a 1-to-3 ratio. Anything bigger than that 1-to-3, where this is probably 1/2 of that there,
Yep, has to go.
it's got to go.
And when you're cutting it, you're making a toilet bowl here, so that you're leaving these blind buds down here to get your actual fruiting shoots
I
out.
want to shoot out of there like that next
Yep.
year. I still want that to produce fruit in there.
Yep.
So that one's too big. This one down here is too big. When you look at the size of that,
Yeah, nearly
Compared to
half
that.
the size of the trunk, isn't it?
it's
Yep.
got to go.
So that's got to go. But when you're removing that, what you're doing is creating opportunities
Yes,
for smaller shoots to
Yes.
have lots of fruit on them closer to the ground. And you want about 2 pieces of fruit per shoot, is that correct?
it's about that length. 2 pieces of fruit. I'll get 2 good size apples,
Yep.
and
And about 20 shoots per trunk.
yeah, so 40, 50 apples on this tree, plenty. Because I've got another 40 or 50 here, and another 40
Yep.
or 50 down here. By the time you add up the row length, we've got plenty.
So people might be scared to remove these large ones thinking, oh, there's so much fruit on this that I'm taking off. But the reality is, if you're leaving these toilet bowls behind, you're going to get a lot more fruiting shoots that are closer to the trunk, be easier to manage, won't get disease.
Better light penetration, better disease control, everything's easier.
So you just got to be brave.
Just got to
Cut
get
it
in
off. Stick to the rule.
No.
1 to 3.
there. No fear. Even on this tree that I've just taken these 2 big cuts out of, here's a cut I did last year, and it's actually produced 3 shoots out of that last year's cut. This one's a beautiful shoot. It's even terminating in a flower bud now. So we'll just do that. This one's a perfect shoot for next year, and it'll grow on about here, and this will have some apples. It's got apples here within 300 millimetres of the trunk of the tree. Perfect.
And that brings up another great point too, Alan, with your pruning, is forks.
Yes.
You keep the forks in the kitchen, not in the orchard, as you've explained to me.
Absolutely.
So can you give me a little bit of a logical explanation on how to get rid of forks and how to choose?
Here's a potential fruiting arm immediately above that last area, and it has terminated here during the summertime or springtime last year, and it has grown 2 shoots out of it. This one here is only going to crowd and create shade. This one out here has got potential for it to be out here in the sunlight and produce good buds and good fruit. I can either cut it off like that, or I can just simply pull it out like that, and that won't shoot again now that it's been pulled out. Had I cut that off here like that, this one would have grown straight back up here and filled up their space again. So to be going along and pulling out some of these things like that, quickest and easiest way to get rid of them. If you don't want them, get rid of them.
So a casual walk through the orchard can still be a maintenance activity.
Yes.
You just wander along and you pull off any forks.
Get rid of the stuff you don't want to know, you don't want.
And no forks in the orchard. Well, Alan, thank you so much, mate. It's been an absolute blast spending time with you, and it is incredible when you talk to someone that's been in the industry for a while and is so good at their job and thinks about what they do, how much you learn. So I'm really grateful to you, and I'm sure a number of viewers are as well. Don't forget, guys, if you like this sort of video, please hit the little subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, and you can check out blogs and more on timthompson.ag. Alan, thanks so much for your time, mate. It's been an honour.
Thank you.
So guys, watch out next week for when I actually start to develop my own dwarf rootstock orchard at home that is trellised, using some fantastic new materials, some great wire products, and Alan's sage and wise advice.
A pair of secateurs like that, just there's fruit behind there, so we can leave that there. It's in the way of the lawnmower. It's too big. It's out on a bit more of an angle. There's fruit there, there's fruit there. Too low, too upright, too far out.
So in a matter of 10 minutes you've opened it right up and you've left most of the fruit on the tree.
Maintaining a limb there with fruiting arms coming off the limb.
Now that's an important point, with this old vase style pruning shape,
yes,
you want 5 to 7 limbs.
That used to be the standard.
Yep.
This one really only got 3 good ones and 1 smaller one.
Yep.
But it's still all the same. It's a vase, it's a limb.
Yep.
There,
with
which
that
is attached
with
to
that internal sunlit area.
Yes, and that comes back to 1 trunk and 1 rootstock. What we're doing in the new orchard up there, is having 1 root system for 1 limb.
Yep.
But a dwarf
so
root
each
system.
tree is a limb.
Each tree is a limb.
And they're planted much closer together.
And they're planted closer together, where I can reach them.